Polio Day to celebrate on Wednesday the 24th, and that's what we're doing today. Doug?
We've forgotten how afraid we were. In 1952, the threat was real. Parents were advised to keep children away from crowds. Pools closed, and movie theaters went dark. Hysteria grew. People were quarantined. It was the worst polio outbreak the United States had ever seen. But it's not ancient history. It's still circulating. As recently as 1988, the World Health Organization estimates that the world saw more than 350,000 new polio cases that year alone. That's nearly 1,000 new cases per day. But through the largest global health initiative in history, we've gone from 350,000 cases annually to just 74 in all of 2015. That's a staggering 99.9% reduction. But we can't quit now. If we don't stop circulation of the virus, we risk reinfection and outbreaks. That's why getting to zero matters. We're not saying it'll be easy. Vaccination in these countries is complex and expensive. In our ultra-connected world, the disease is never more than a plane ride away. Within 10 years, failure to eradicate polio from these last remaining strongholds could result in as many as 200,000 new cases every year. We've immunized 2.5 billion children in the world's largest, most sophisticated global health initiative. Our commitment to eradication matters now more than ever. We are on the cusp of making history.
Year to date, as the president of a Rotary Club, of which there's 36,000, we get an email every single week on a polio update. And my email, the most recent one just received, is there are 36 cases year to date, 16 in Afghanistan, 4 in Pakistan, 16 in Nigeria. And it's not eradicated until there's 0 cases for 3 years in a human being or in a water source. So we've spent $1.5 billion in 30 years, not just Rotary, but the world. Expected to spend another $1.5 billion. Rotary's in with a pledge of $450 million, heavily backed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who've been doing a 2-for-1 for years, and many countries continue to step up. So we have a lot to do. We'd like to have Vice President Chip Chapman introduce today's very special polio victim, but she is so thankful for all that Rotary's doing.
Thanks, President Callaway. So, in honor of World Polio Day, I started doing some research earlier this summer and was surprised a little bit that there is an Ohio Polio Network. And after doing a little digging, I was able to be introduced to Patti Ruble and Ali Rahimi. And their story was very interesting. They had the opportunity earlier this year, back in May, to visit with the governor. And Kasich actually signed an executive order creating a 10-member Ohio Technology First Council to advise state officials on ways to expand the use of technology to assist Ohioans with developmental disabilities. But I really was excited to hear Patti's story. Now, Patti's got a little challenge today. She was in the hospital for the past couple of weeks, so her hearing is not great, but we're going to work with her, particularly when we get to the Q&A. But I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to turn it over to Patti and let you hear her story. We heard the international story. I wanted you guys to hear a local story about polio. Thanks.
I just want to tell you how happy I am to be here, particularly on this particular day of World Polio Day, because I it's in honor of Jonas Salk and the wonderful discovery that he had against polio, but also and primarily how so many of you Rotarians actually went out and risked sometimes your lives and have given your life for to eradicate this throughout the world. So far, I understand you're 99% free, and 1 more percent, I know you're going to do it because God's been with you this long, this far, and you are going to do it. And you are my heroes. You are an inspiration to me. Anyway, I'm going to interrupt myself for the moment because I want to explain and hope that it gets across how badly I wanted to be here. Because on October 3rd, I was taken into emergency, and where my respiration and everything was fairly good before that, and my hearing wasn't great, but it was okay. I now cannot hear anything because of the high fever that I went in with. I went in with pneumonia, flu, and cold, running against also a blood infection. So they almost lost me a couple times, but I was meant to be here. So I just really want to thank you so much for having me, for having us. We come as a team. And I want to tell you that this young man is so special to me. And whatever I do now is because of him. So much in my life, he's right there. Anyway, so I wanted to tell you this because I wanted to explain about my, I may be looking at you and I'm loving everything you say, but I probably don't know what you said, But to get back on track, I'm going to be using this as a teleprompter because I just really don't trust myself otherwise right now. I'm a survivor of one of the last big epidemics in 1955 of polio. I was 12 years old, a very, very active child. And this is kind of where polio usually hit, or hyperactive kids, things like that. And my life was saved then. I almost died, but my life was saved by the ingenious technology of that day, which was the iron lung. And I don't know how many of you might know what an iron lung was, but my mom called it a washing machine, but I don't think it looked like that at all. It looked like a CAT scan. And then they kind of put you into it with your head out and everything else sealed. And it did your breathing for you. It did mine for 3 months by air compression. And it released, and you breathed in, it compressed, and you breathed out. And it had a lot of little portholes so that the air wouldn't come in from the outside when they were moving me and everything, because the mattress was under there. Anyway, it was just a great thing because it helped me to breathe when I couldn't, and it allowed me to survive, to live a full, wonderful, enjoyable life. And I have. I've lived so many phases. I think I've lived maybe 10 lifetimes. I'm 76 now. They told me that I wouldn't live beyond age 15. I want to explain until Jonas Salk discovered the vaccine, life was really scary for families and for parents at that time, because every year you expected the worst. And it always hit children and young people. And the hospitals, main hospitals, would reserve full floors just because of the patients, the little young patients they knew would be coming in. They would reserve maybe 20 to 30 of the iron lungs for those that lived, were able to live to use them. And polio leaves a lot of limitations sometimes barely none. I mean, I've known people, just maybe one little muscle in the back of their leg or something like that, wear a half brace, and maybe not even that. Every year in which there was an epidemic, thousands of children died, more thousands were left with severe functional limitations. By the way, this is interesting because I heard recently most of the caregivers of polio patients were nurses, and because the protocols that they had to use were different from what they would be using with other patients, they pretty much played into the establishment of the physical therapy profession. And I thought that was totally interesting. As a survivor of polio, what I would really like to talk about here is what I learned from it. Let's see. Okay, I've learned so many things that I think the most important one is what I now believe about inspiration. Since this is a theme of inspiration today, a very, very wise theme, it's like that wonderful ambience sometimes surrounds an individual and connects them with another individual. And this is a beautiful thing, but it always has to result in motivation to do things. Like you guys were inspired by Jonas Salk and his wonderful discovery, but it gave you the motivation to make sure that something wonderful came of that discovery. And for that reason, I admire you so much. So if you feel inspired by something, you have to see all the ripples that come from that inspiration. Because whatever you do, and from the motivation that it gives you, ripples and it comes out, the impacts are endless. They're everywhere. I know a lot of people have come to me and said, you inspire me. But that's not something that you really know what it is that they're saying, because you know what they're saying, but I'd like to figure out how you do it. Just automatically, hey, I need some inspiration today, and you can just kind of funnel it out. But I think it's just the way a person lives. The things that they do, the things that you see they follow through with. And that's why I've come to respect and admire the Rotarians so much, because they have done so much with their beliefs and with their to give to always be giving. And they've proven it. And it's not just a thing that comes out of their mouth. Like some clubs, you know, I never figured out what they did. But this one is wonderful. There were so many things that I wanted to tell you. The things that I did, for instance, after polio. I was used often by the March of Dimes as a kind of poster kid, all of that stuff. And I'd collect in the wheelchair. I'd be going from house to house and collecting for March of Dimes. Things like that. And I went to a lot of events that they had set up. I got polio in Indiana, in Gary, Indiana, initially. And then we moved back home to Youngstown. But I then had the opportunity, which was wonderful, to go down to Warm Springs. I don't know how many of you may have heard of Warm Springs, Georgia, but it is the rehab center that Franklin Roosevelt started. And that is, I mean, it should be held as a model of how to rehabilitate somebody fully from a life-changing condition or something. Anyway, when I came back home, I started to go out on my own with my little electric wheelchair that was one of the first in the whole world. And it didn't look at all like this fancy getup, but I'd go from door to door to meet the neighbors and sell greeting cards. So I got to know a lot of, I got a lot of friends that way. I also fell a few times, I remember, which is very interesting. And I then lived with my family for about 20 years, at which time I got very bored being at home. So I called Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation. I mean, I didn't get bored being at home. I just ran out of things to do that were new. So I started having completing a creative writing course from Ohio University. And then it was a religious experience that brought me out of that, and I called. I didn't want to read the kind of crummy books they made me read. So I called BVR and I said, "Nah, I don't want to do this anymore, Scotty. So come on up here and take the materials you gave me. I'll give you back the typewriter. I'll give you back everything." And he came up and he said, "No, your grades are too good. Your potential is too good. You can't just leave it like that." I said, "What am I going to do?" He says, "We're going to get you out of here and into school." And I couldn't believe that, because he wanted me to live by myself over in Columbus, Ohio. And so it was really something to wrap my head around. And so I said, "How am I going to do that?" He said, "You will pay for attendance, aides." And he said that he knows of a place called Creative Living, which is where it's actually where I live now. And it's a neat, a very good place for somebody to start off or continue to live while they're going to school or while they're have a job. And so I lived there for about, for about 8 years, and then I got married, so then there were 8 years. We moved to Upper Arlington, where I stayed after we also separated, and that changed, so I got divorced. And so I was in Upper Arlington for 10 years, and then moved back to Creative Living. And during that time, I got my master's in social work at Ohio State. And from there, I got a job. Everything, all the jobs I got were always just a little bit off from the usual social work path. Like, I worked with a bunch of attorneys at Legal Aid Society of Columbus. And since I was the only social worker, I got to design my own, what I was going to do. So the attorneys, each one would I said, just tell me anything to do and I'll do what I can. And I fulfilled just about everything that they wanted, most of which was money or cleaning up people's apartments. And then my second job with Mid-Ohio Board of Independent Living Environment got me out because my job was to find out who wanted to leave nursing homes and help them to do it. So I actually found apartments for them. I was given money to pay first month's deposit and the first month's rent, get all the food they needed, everything that they could ever need to start off with. And I was able to get about 31 people out of nursing homes that way, and then I got tired of the politics of the agency, so I quit. And at that time, somebody that I know decided that, he didn't like the care that I was getting. So he was going to help me by starting his own agency. And I didn't know what to make of this, because I heard him go through the time. He's an engineer. So I heard him go through the time when he really wanted to be a movie director. Then he wanted to be a restaurateur. Then and I coaxed him through all of these. Yeah, he can do anything he wants. I mean, he's that intelligent and that motivated. And so I didn't know what to make of this new agency until he actually opened it up. And I was his first client. And he's my family. He's my son. And so there was so many things I've gone through in my life, and I thank God for giving me this life to go through with it. And also this last experience taught me how much I valued it and how much I wanted to be here with you. I probably garbled this whole talk up, but I wanted to be with you so much that I tried to rush getting well until my nurse started yelling at me for it. She said, "You can't hurry it up." But I said, I'm going. I don't care, I'm going. So I can't hear you guys, but I look at your faces and I love you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having us here today. I guess we are here to celebrate the World Polio Day, but for me, it's actually also celebrating Patty's life and what she's been able to accomplish and how she inspired everyone around her to realize their full potential. For a long time, I thought I'm helping her, but now when I look back and to the past 14 years that I've known her, I just can't imagine my life any other way. It's inspiring. She's a motivation to everyone who crossed paths with her, and she said it well. And I'm just thankful for everything you guys have done to eradicate polio, and I'm looking forward to seeing it's to be eradicated, polio, malaria, and every other disease that is taking lives. And thank you very much.
Thank you both so very much. Rather than taking questions right now, we'd like you to approach Patty and Ali after the meeting ends. Nelson French has some special words for our celebration of World Polio Day. Nelson?
Wasn't aware of how long this wonderful lady was going to talk, and so I had prepared a timeline of all the aspects of polio, which I'm going to ignore. I'm going to repeat some things that some of you have heard, but everybody needs to hear again. We in Rotary don't really understand what we're a part of, most of us. The eradication of any disease, but particularly polio, is enormously difficult. It is a complex undertaking that is almost beyond one's imagination. How many of you, I don't want to embarrass you, but don't flunk the four-way test here. How many of you read your Rotary magazine? Wonderful. I'm going to guarantee you there are some Rotarian households where it comes in monthly and goes into the recycle bin. There are some others where it comes in and goes on the coffee table for later reading and never happens. But if you really want to know what you're part of in Rotary, you look at that magazine. And particularly, and I hope you still have it, look at this issue. That's last month's issue. And I'm seeing some nodding heads. This issue tells you, has 10 pages on called Where We Are Now. And it describes the difficulties, not only the history of our involvement in Rotary, but the difficulties of it. And following that is a wonderful, wonderful story of a Rotaractor in one of the African countries. It's called Climb Every Mountain. And in this, it tells how she participated in the application of the polio vaccine in her country, traveling roughly, I think it was 6 hours by car, and then hiking into the backwoods to make sure that everybody gets this polio vaccine. It's a marvelous story, very brief one, but a wonderful, wonderful story. And Rotary has now made a virtual reality presentation about it. I want to just help you understand, and some of you have heard this before, what happened here in this district. I was eternally blessed to be the Rotary Polio Plus district governor. Rotary first got involved with polio 6 years before that in the Philippines, when we undertook to vaccinate 6 million kids against polio. Sounds like an enormous number, doesn't it? 6 million kids. It went well. So in 1985, we decided to go worldwide with this program, which Rotary had never, ever done before. In 87, 88, which happened to be my year, we conducted the first fundraising for this program. And we adopted what we thought was a mostly unattainable goal of $120 million worldwide. The results of that were announced at the International Convention in Philadelphia that May of '88. Emmy and I were there. There were roughly 4,000 people there, and it was a big arena, and around the balcony, they had strung light bulbs, each one representing, I think it was $800,000. And they started with the 7 different regions of the world. They started with Africa, which was the least capable of raising money. We knew when we walked in there that the goal had been reached because there was a big rocket sticking up on the stage. And you knew very well that wouldn't have been there if we hadn't. So they started announcing these, and when they got through the first 6, all but North America, all those light bulbs were already lit. And then they announced the North America, US, Canada, Mexico, and that was more than 120 million itself. The total was roughly 244 million, more than double the goal. And that's when we knew we really had a tiger by the tail. Since then, as was indicated in the video, Rotary's involvement is over $1 billion with a B dollars. Several years ago, the Gates Foundation contributed, I think it was $345 million, and issued a challenge to Rotary, a grant match kind of thing, where they would match what we did if we raised $200 million. We beat the target for that by about 5 months. Took about a little over 2 years. But as of the present time, we're over $1 billion of involvement. But that's only part of the story. Read that magazine and understand what people have to go through, including giving their lives. There have been a number of people involved in the application of the vaccines who have lost their lives. Just one brief example of the difficulties. In Nigeria, as you may know, a good section of Nigeria is Islamic. The imams got it in their head that this vaccine was some kind of Western plot to immunize their kids. So they told their people, don't take the vaccine. So there was a whole section in Nigeria where they're done. The Nigerians got really serious about it, got out and communicated with these people and got their minds turned around. So now it's being done. As the thing indicated, we're now down to 3 countries, and it's been reducing in Pakistan and Nigeria. Nigeria is now down in the last 4 years to 0, 0, 4, and this year 0 again. I'm sorry, 0, 4, 0, 0. One more year 0, they'll be certified polio-free. But as the thing also pointed out, it's a plane ride away, or a bus ride, or anything else. So we have to get the whole job done. Lots more to do, lots involved. This lady, what a spirit, what a sense of humor. She's an enormous example of how you conquer something, but we need to get this job done. So I urge you, do this and give to polio. Thank you.
Nelson, if you'll just stay here just for a moment. Thank you so much, not just for your remarks, for being an active Rotarian for 30 years and never relinquishing that inspiration. Nelson has contributed $1,000 this year on a personal contribution, part of our Columbus Rotary Club in this Rotary year 2019 to make polio eradication even more of a cause and an education, and with our theme, Be the Inspiration. We've had a few casual fundraisers over the last few months. Now I have an ask. The district has an ask for the last couple of years that every Rotarian contribute $25 to Polio Plus. Today's was the inspirational speaker by Patty and Ali. Thank you for joining your remarks. And Nelson's. It's going to culminate on Monday, November 19th, when we have 2 times ago Rotary International President John Germ. He concluded at the convention in Atlanta in June of 17. He's going to be our guest speaker. He then, in a couple years, will go on to chair the Rotary International Foundation. And our club would be fabulous if every Rotarian would send a check, bring a check to Scott Brown, make it out to Rotary International Foundation, memo line Polio Plus, $25 each. Thank you so much for your leadership and continued inspiration, Nelson. Thank you. I introduced Patty as a polio victim. Yes, she was a polio victim. She introduced herself as being a polio survivor. She has been that. She's been an inspiration because many have told her that. She's a hero to us. I'm always good as long as I don't go through the hearts. Our theme this year, Patty, is Be the Inspiration. Thank you for being an inspiration and hero to us today.